election.
We're not saying election fraud's going on, but there certainly have been some very interesting things that happened. Josh, I know you've heard some stories from your family members who voted. A picture that's circulating around the internet right now of a U-Haul truck dropping off ballots in Detroit. Now, nobody quite knows what's going on here, and just to be clear, there could be a perfectly logical explanation for this. You need to move ballots from point A to point B. You need to rent a truck for logistics, etc. So nothing wrong on that front. But I'm very curious to know from the official records, because I do believe all this should be made official, especially if the truck is acting in an official capacity, to see just exactly what it was doing, what its role was, who paid for it, and just kind of following the money, just kind of see what happened on that front. Because you can see, and Josh, I don't know if you can share my screen here, but so supposedly Detroit, and supposedly those are ballot boxes right there being dropped off. Anyways, again, there might be, in fact, there probably is a perfectly normal explanation for this. The logistics of running an election, it's complex or whatever, right? I certainly haven't done it myself. I don't mean to tell others how to do their job, but I am very curious to look at the behind the scenes.
Or maybe if the people who are facilitating these things are actually alive, and if they're using their personal credit cards to facilitate this kind of U-Haul transaction.
Yes. So just to be perfectly clear, there are many explanations you can think of why this would be completely legit, and there are also many explanations you can think of why this would be completely, I don't say illegitimate, but at least raise more questions. For example, if the truck was rented in the name of a dead person, paid for by a personal credit card, neither of those seem to be applicable for a resource being utilized by the city or whatever the county is in order to maintain an election. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, for personal story, and this is 100% legit, and there's no real conspiracies around it. In New Hampshire, one of my mom's best friend is in the fourth largest city in the state, and it has, I mean, I don't know how many millions of people, but it's pretty large. And usually for elections they have every single school where you can go vote at, but for this particular election they only allowed one school where everyone could vote at, and they closed at like 9 p.m. So this lady was in line, and she said that there was about a 5-mile car wait to get to this. She went there after work, got there around 5 p.m. and I don't even think she got to vote because they closed up shop. Or it was something insane where it just, why would you do this? And then let's just take an example. A few months ago, my grandmother had a pretty serious stroke, and she had a hard time speaking. She didn't even recognize people at some points. I mean, she was doing really, really bad. There was a politician who just had one of those exact same strokes, and he was very clear that he didn't know what was going on, just like my grandmother didn't. And miraculously, someone like this could pull off a victory and get incredible amounts of funding. I was talking to my grandmother and said, when she went through that process, I mean, now she's fine, she's doing good. Would she have wanted to be in a position of Senate or House? Would she want to have a position of power? She said she couldn't even, like, she didn't really know what was going on around her at all. So how would someone like that be fit to be in a position of power that has direct control over what we do in our day-to-day life?
Yeah, and of course, there's also Arizona. At least as when we made this video, things seem to be a bit ambiguous there. And it's the same problem, children, that keep coming up. Maricopa, or however you say that county, is running into issues there too. But in any event, if people want more in-depth, coverage and kind of like perspective on the election, hat tip to Scott Adams. He does a daily live stream where he does a pretty good take on this. And I think one of the things that I've tried to learn from Adams myself is the application of the maxim, never ascribe to malice that which you can ascribe to ignorance. So anyways, that's why I say, like, before, people start, frothing at the bit and claiming fraud or whatnot, let's first, see what's going on. There might be a perfectly valid explanation for all of the stuff. And if there's not, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But
yeah, and what's really weird is how many irregularities there were across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And on one day, I know my mother was telling, I didn't vote, and I don't think I will ever vote because I'm against the state as a whole. But she was telling me that what they were doing is, they were like, you would kind of fill out your slit or whatever, and then they were just taking him to the back room. And the lady in front of her was saying, dude, I do not feel comfortable with you taking this to the back room. Like, I don't want this. And I don't know the complete details, but I wasn't there. And they were like, well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, the rules are the rules, but somehow the rules changed this one day when they've never been like this. for their entire lives voting, and it turned into this massive argument of saying like I don't feel comfortable with this happening, but well, rules are rules, and there's nothing we can really do. But why would there be so many weird rules happening across so many different places on this one day? There's a lot of red flags that come up that we're definitely
Yeah.
not saying anything's happening, but where there's smoke, there's sometimes fire.
Yeah, and this is again hat tip to Scott Adams. The answer is both the Republicans and the Democrats. They both want to cheat, or when I say cheat, they both want to maximize whatever gains they can, loopholes or irregularities, if not outright fraud on the system for their own ends. That's why both the GOP and the Dems, I think, have a very strong motivation to actually not try to fix anything, even though they have to put forth the appearance of looking like they're trying to fix things. It's like I'm always fond about saying about banks. Banks don't give one, what about, KYC or AML. Let me say this another way. Banks don't care about following the rules, but they do care a great deal about looking like they follow the rules. And there's a very important and very nuanced difference between those two things.
Yeah,
so
I think
during
this one, it didn't even seem like they were trying to make anything seem unsuspicious. And the reason I say this is there's a lot of people that I have talked to that are calling for direct fraud and saying this is the most criminal thing that has ever happened in this country. And if it was really intelligence players behind the scenes, you do not want to raise a bunch of red flags. And the reason for that is once someone has deep distrust for a government, there's no way to get that back. And the more you throw at something, let's take lockdowns for example. There was a wave of people who start to distrust the government because of that. Then let's just take a certain war with a certain country that could potentially be going on right now. There's a lot of irregularities there, and then more people start to distrust the government because of that. And then we see more things of, let's just say, an election that is just, there's a bunch of questions and no answers. More irregularities around that, more people start to distrust. And the people who start to distrust at the first thing, they don't ever come back to trusting the government again. So all you're doing is adding more and more people into a pool that have deep distrust. And to have extreme civil disobedience, you do not need 50% of the populace to say, no, this doesn't count for me. In reality, you only need, let's say, 15-20%. And the example I'll use is during the COVID era when you had to wear a mask on a plane. I was going to Naples, Florida, and that's a pretty freedom-loving area right in Naples. A lot of old people who go there to retire, and about 10 to 15% of the people wouldn't wear their mask on the plane, and they were all sitting around me. And when we all took our masks off, at first the flight attendant came over and said, "Can you please put your mask on?" And then no one put their mask on, and they didn't come back because they knew, well, there's no way I can tell 7 people to put their mask on. Maybe everyone else is wearing it, but if 7 people won't do it, I mean, what am I going to do? Am I gonna fight off 7 people? No, because it doesn't make sense. And these people, workers, they do not want to hassle. So if a big enough percentage of the population, and that's still a very small percent, comes to have this deep distrust, or they start to stand up for what they believe in, and then you can really make a severe difference.
There's a critical number where Rickards makes this comment. I'm sure others have too. If 6 people in a theater all of a sudden scream, fire, and run for the exit, that might not be enough to trigger 7. But if, let's say, 10 do it, then that's enough to trigger 11. When 11 does it, then that triggers 12 and 13. When 12 and 13 do it, that triggers 14, 15, 16. So you get this cascade effect. So there's some number where you need enough people to come together and say, wait a minute, we're all thinking the same thing, and this is nonsense. We're not going to put up with this. But I would say you have seen this erosion of confidence in the experts, starting with the pandemic, looking at the elections. And look, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right or GOP or Dem. Everyone is best served as an American, and I certainly hope we're all rooting for America to have fair and transparent elections. And it's ridiculous we can't seem to get this right. We didn't have a problem in the past, and maybe we need to drop the electronics and go back to pencil and paper, or I should say pen and paper. But then again, maybe it's a little harder to look for those irregularities if you don't have electronics to help the people who have bad intentions, whatever.
And
so.
Yeah, and what people don't understand is we are at complete risk of getting our entire channel terminated just raising questions. There's nothing that we're saying.
Josh, let me interject. We're not raising any questions. We are not alleging any election fraud, just to be absolutely clear. If you look back at 2020, no court found any evidence of any election fraud, just to be perfectly clear. And I'm not aware, at least as recording this on the 10th, that any election fraud has been found. But simply just saying, well, listen, here are some questions I have. I'm certain there's a very plausible, reasonable explanation for it. Can I just have the reasonable explanation for it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all.
And this is enough to get a channel terminated because we are simply erasing questions about a subject. And you know that if something is unquestionable, there is someone that doesn't want it questioned. If you feasibly cannot question a certain group of people or a thing in the past or in the present, that should raise big red flags. Something that is 100% certain and feasibly cannot be questioned is going against every single scientific process of all time. And any time throughout past when someone has censored people on a certain subject, it has almost always led to the opposite conclusion being closer to the truth.